The Environmental Effects Overhaul update for Going Medieval brings a lot of changes and additions to the game, but one of those in particular makes underground farming and greenhouses once again possible. In my old video I showed you how to build greenhouses, and in my underground village let's play I explained how to grow food and trees underground. But all that stopped functioning once the developers updated the game so that plants didn't grow if sunlight was blocked. Made lots of sense of course, but it also removed those wild gameplay strategies off the table. Well, I'm happy to say that both of these are back due to the addition of Grated Floors. These grates let in the all-important sunlight while preventing hail from coming in. They come in two varieties, wicker grated floor and metal grated floor. The sunlight itself has become a very important mechanic in the game with this update, and let me show you on several different setups how all this affects plant growth and how you can build your own greenhouses and even grow food underground. This here is my 2 levels deep underground pit made in fertile ground type called dirt. And as you can see, my settlers are managing to get an actual harvest from these plants midsummer from carrots, while a whole bunch of cabbage was harvested even earlier. Besides cabbage and carrots, I have planted here beets, barley and herbs, as well as adding clay braziers, which now have 3 levels of heating, low, medium and high. This helps to fine-tune the temperature inside these kinds of underground pits to keep the plants at optimal temperature for growing even in cold spring or autumn days, while in the summertime you get the same temperature underground as above ground. This can all be achieved above ground too, and in greenhouses, where the main difference will be the amount of sunlight plants get and in turn the yield from these crops. While the sunlight will be 100% on top of these grated floors, which make the roof of a greenhouse, the inside will only get about 60% sunlight if you have full dirt wall pillars. This 30 to 40 difference in the amount of sunlight to normal above ground farming will mean a small difference in crop yields, but it is much higher than the yields you will get from plants which are grown 2 levels down at just 30 to 40% sunlight. Now for more optimal setups of the greenhouse and underground farming, I had to experiment a bit with windows and shallower underground pits, and I also experimented with a greenhouse for trees and apple orchards. These proved especially difficult to get right because of the walls blocking off too much sunlight needed for tree growth. I added some windows at the top levels just before the grated floor tiles acting as the roof, but the small trees growing at the first level got very little sunlight. I think a much better result could be achieved with using almost exclusive windows in the construction of the greenhouse for trees, but then how would we close all those windows in autumn and winter in time to prevent the cold from stopping growth? Some paths on walls acting as walkways and ladders which were added in this update could help to actually do this, but it is still quite time consuming for questionable gains. In any event, the option is there, it just needs further refinement and testing. Now let's get back to the main points of this video, the underground farms and the above ground greenhouses. I will first show you the building and effect of the prototype versions, and then we will go over the improved 1.0 versions. You are of course welcome to add your own ideas and tips in the comments below, and I remind you that most of my guides on this game are quite relevant and linked down below in the description and up here on the right. If you feel I need to update some of those older guides, do let me know. As you saw, the first step was to dig stairs down to the granite level and be able to have offshoots and tunnels into each layer of the ground. After that, I took one tunnel over to just off the side of my main building, where I planned to dig the pit which would let the sun shine through to the underground farm. I dug it from the outside in, but tried to make sure a settler doesn't get trapped in the hole as it was being dug. The idea was to connect the tunnel under the pit so that settlers could use the stairs, which usually lead to the basement, to also reach the underground farm. I had my stairs off to one side of it. You can also do it like that, or in the middle if you want. At the same time, I was also digging the pit from underground, meaning the actual farming would be done on the bottom of the third underground level, leaving more than 2 full levels of clear space above the plants. Once the first top layer of dirt was removed, I added stairs down so settlers could dig the second layer from above, as you cannot dig up, only straight or down. I decided to go with wooden beams as the support for the grated floors to make sure I had the necessary stability under the floor, which was acting as the roof for this underground farm. Once the settlers finished digging the third underground level, I was able to start laying down strips of individual plants to farm. You do have to make sure to have actual dirt under where you're doing this, or at least rocky ground, as some plants can grow on that ground type. Once I got to digging out the last remaining second dirt layer, I had some management issues with the settlers to make sure they both dug it out and didn't get stuck somewhere. A few tries with stairs and floor tiles helped to get that sorted out, and the stairs down helped to get access to lay down the grated floor tiles, going from the outside where there is support and stability from the walls, which is then carried over up to 4 tiles away, and the wooden beams from underneath also help to give stability to the floor structure. The finishing touch was adding the mentioned clay braziers necessary to increase the temperature, as not only does it fall down because of the farm being underground, but also because the grates do let through the cold air from above. The main drawbacks of this design are the complicated digging and construction process and the low sunlight level resulting in low plant yields, while the main advantage is temperature control and settlers working in controlled, safe conditions both from enemies and weather. But do take note that settlers and enemies can shoot bows and crossbows through the grated floor tiles, so they cannot offer complete protection. Now, the improved 1.0 version of this underground farm design is to dig just one level deep. In this case, I used my existing underground farm to connect to the new one, set up a passage for settlers, and cover the top with grated floor tiles. The new underground farm inside this shallow pit will have much higher sunlight exposure at about 60 to 70%, meaning your plants will yield crops faster and more abundant than the deep farm. Aside from the much easier construction, that is this design's biggest advantage, while the downside of it being more open to attack and damage by enemies, as it is not protected by a deep pit. Another important note is that with the new temperature mechanics and effects, settlers will get heat stroke when in the sun for a long period of time. This is another reason why having them work in huge open fields at 100% sunlight is not always the best solution, and why these underground farms or greenhouses with grated roofs can help with that. Depending on your playstyle, village structure and game mode, you will use the farm design which fits best for your current playthrough. Now, as for the greenhouse, let's take a look at the simplest design first. A cube made out of just dirt pillars on all sides and covered up by the wicker grates. That is it. The only added complexity are the clay braziers, which help to regulate the temperature inside the greenhouse. Being above ground, it has 100% sunlight at the roof and grates, but those let in only about 60 to 70% of it down to the plants. This is indeed sufficient for average harvests and plants growing in normal time. It also has the added benefit of more easily making sure you have fertile ground to place the farms on. Your villagers are more protected from weather like hail, as well as cold and freezing temperatures, when you can heat up those braziers, which are best placed on each corner to give good coverage to the room, but some burning torches in the middle might be necessary. The thermal insulation from the dirt pillars is at 0.95, which is basically the highest in the game, and helps to regulate the room temperature. Now, we can take this design to the extreme and set up a greenhouse which is almost completely made up of windows, to maximize the amount of sunlight we can get in an enclosed space. For this, I am again using the simplest possible design. One door in, a cube with every side being made up of windows and only the corners being wooden walls. The roof is again made up of wicker grated floor tiles, and the center position, which lacks any structural stability, can be filled in with a wooden pillar onto which I can add 4 torches to give me extra fine-tuning control over the inside temperature. Once the construction is finished, I can fill in the inside with farms for different plants, and if I run into any rocky ground, I can use the type of plants which can grow in that ground type. As for the corners, those I'm going to leave empty for later additions like the braziers. So while this design, which includes windows, will help to increase the sunlight percentage that falls on the plants inside the greenhouse, it also comes with a number of drawbacks. Foremost is the fact that windows will be letting in the outside air in. Most problematic once cold weather sets in, and even when they are closed, which again means extra work for settlers, they are not giving the same thermal insulation as dirt pillars since they are made out of wood, which has a considerably lower thermal insulation index. Here you are basically trading in the higher plant yields for less time during which you can keep farming. This is a delicate balance, as you have to figure out if producing more for a shorter time nets you more food in the end than having more harvests which produce lower yields. This isn't something I can just flat out say which is better, as there are too many elements which may vary depending on your settler skills, settlement terrain and location, type of plants you have in the greenhouse, type of material used for construction, time of planting, and so on. You can tell me your experience and share it with all the other players down in the comments once you manage to get your own underground farms and greenhouses operational. Of course, it wouldn't be me if I didn't take all this to the extreme by combining these two concepts. But I will leave that for the next video. Thank you for watching and happy gaming!